Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. Today is the start of a series that I would like to do on this channel where I do kind of like deep dives into different K-pop things. That's not a good title for this series, but what I want to do is, because I love watching video essays on YouTube. That's one of my favorite things, is just watching somebody or listening to somebody talk about things that they care about in a way that makes me care about it because I can see how much they care about it. Some examples are, there's a channel on YouTube called Mike's Mike, and he did a 3-part, like 6-hour, basically like plot summary documentary on Pretty Little Liars, and they're amazing. I'd never watched Pretty Little Liars before. I still haven't seen any episodes of it, but I know the plot because I watched him talk about all of these episodes, and it was just so interesting. And there's another channel called Jenny Nicholson, and she goes, she has a couple that are amazing. She did like a BronyCon like video essay type thing. She did one on Everland, which is a theme park type thing, and they're amazing. I just love video essays so much, and I've always wanted to do one because I talk a lot. You guys know that, but I feel like I hadn't really been able to find a way to to merge the two of like K-pop and the video essay style. But then I thought about this, and why don't I at least start off by doing a breakdown of the different K-pop generations. Right now we're just sort of at the beginning, I guess, of the 5th gen of K-pop, so I thought it'd be interesting to kind of do like a deep dive on each of the generations. And then I would also love to do deep dives on different K-pop groups, because there are tons of videos out there on K-pop groups, like, this group 101, get to know them. And those videos are obviously super good. For me though, I always found them difficult to watch because I like to listen to videos more than watch them. And a lot of those videos are text. Like, here's a whole bunch of text, like summarizing the different members, and then here's a couple clips of them. And so some of the times I find it difficult if I just want to listen. So I thought that I could be the person to do the deep dives or like the introducing people, like different groups, and then it's a way for you guys to just listen or watch, I guess, but whatever. But I think that would be really fun. So at the beginning of this video, let me know what groups you would like me to do a deep dive of. Obviously SHINee will be one that I do because they're the group I know the most about, but let me know what other groups you would like me to do, whether they're new or old. I think there'd be a lot to talk about kind of in one video for them. But for this video, we're gonna start off this type of series with a Gen 1 K-pop breakdown. Like I said, there's only 5 generations of K-pop. At this point, we're sort of at the start of the 1st gen, so K-pop's not that old, but I still think that because of just how fast things have progressed, Gen 1 is the most different of the generations. Like the one, I think, more of a distinct, like, here's Gen 1, and then the other gens can a lot of them can kind of like mix and meld a little bit just because they're a little bit more similar. But I've loved researching about Gen 1. It's been so interesting, so I'm so excited to tell you all about it today. Generation 1, or what is considered Generation 1 of K-pop, is, I mean, all generations, like there's no definitive like start and end date for any of them because it was kind of just like organically as it's come up, but generally it is accepted by every source that I was able to look at that Generation 1 of K-pop is between 1990 and 2002. So that is the timeline that I will be working with for what I consider Generation 1. Again, things kind of change a little bit depending on what source you look at, but that's kind of generally what I think people say most of the time. But even though I say 1990 to 2002 as like the start and end date of Generation 1, technically the first ever like agreed upon K-pop song, because there is one song that people generally, the consensus is that this was the first K-pop song, was actually released in 1992, and it is Seo Taeji and the Boys' I Know. Now, it's not like pop music didn't exist in Korea before that song came out. Like, it's not like music just didn't exist at all or anything, but pop music, or kind of like what is now, I guess, K-pop, before was kind of just seen as like targeted toward preteen girls, kind of girl pop, girl music, like you know, cater toward that like young female demographic. But something that Seo Taeji and the boys did that kind of made them more acceptable toward like a wider audience was that they were able to, they put a lot of like social pressures, I guess, like in their songs. Like they talked about like pressures in school and stuff, and like that was something that hadn't really been touched on in music at that point, as far as I'm able to tell. I will also mention all the sources that I was able to look at for this are in English, since I don't know enough Korean to like look at a lot of Korean sources. So some of the stuff that I'm saying might not be totally correct, as of course it's just a translation. If there's any corrections that you know that you would like to make, please leave them down below, because I don't want to spread any misinformation. But this is just what I was able to find with the sources that I was able to look at. But going back, Seo Taeji and the boys, they were able to like connect to a way wider audience than had been accepted before, and that really changed. Like that one song kind of changed the direction and created K-pop. I mean, can you imagine a world without K-pop now? It seems like it's so like crazy, but like that without that song, we might not have had K-pop the way that it is. So Seo Taeji and the boys, hats off to you. They were also kind of the pioneers. They're known as the pioneers of bringing kind of hip hop into the Korean like pop scene as well. And listening to I Know, you can definitely see the K-pop in it. Like it's very much like we're singing and then we're rapping and we're rapping and we're rapping and a rap breakdown and then we're singing again. It's like very K-pop-y, which I think is just so fun to look at. I'm like, well, there's where it started. There it is. But yeah, they were definitely like, which I think is funny as we'll get into the companies because of the hip hop thing. You'll see where I'm going with it. But they were kind of the first, I don't necessarily know if everything they did was K-pop, considered kind of K-pop, but that song for sure is like first K-pop song, here it is. In terms of the other groups that we have that were considered part of that first generation of K-pop, we have Shinhwa, H.O.T, G.O.D, BoA, Fly to the Sky, S.E.S. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that one correctly, but I'll have it written out here, however you pronounce that. Jewelry, Finkel, S.E.S, and there were many more. I'm not gonna have time in this video to talk about every single group that existed in Gen 1, but the ones that I mentioned are kind of the ones that when I was looking, like that I had recognized, because you'll notice, I'll put some of the videos in this video as well, that a lot of these songs were then re-released later by other K-pop groups in the following generations, which I think is really interesting. The cycle of music just continues. But those are the groups that I recognized at least like some of their songs for. But there were other groups that were involved in the first gen of K-pop.
싫다고 하셨어. 그렇게 살아가고 그렇게 후회하고. 내 세상이죠. This is my mental ID. 달라요. 갈 수 없는 세계 누군 없죠.
Of course, this first gen of K-pop was also the introduction of the Big Three. Now, the Big Three, I think, has now become the Big Four, which you may have heard of in K-pop, and it's in regards to the companies that exist that house K-pop idols. So the Big Three used to be YG Entertainment, SM Entertainment, and JYP Entertainment. Now with the Big Four, HYBE is in there as well, and I feel like YG is like a little less than it used to be, but there was no HYBE back in the day, so it was just the three. Now I'm gonna talk a little bit, just like a little synopsis of each company. We'll start with SM Entertainment. So SM Entertainment started in 1989 by Lee Soo-man, and it actually was SM Studio at first, and it was just like a studio that was housed in Gangnam. And then in 1995, it changed into SM Entertainment. And something that SM did that I think was sort of different than maybe other companies at the time is that they really wanted to like have a one-stop shop for the entire like idol industry, kind of like they wanted to look at all aspects of the career. So not just music production and like music videos, but also like, you know, any like acting and variety and all of these things. They wanted to have like the complete package, like make sure that their idols, number one, complete package, didn't need to go anywhere else. They could learn it all and have it all under one roof. Which I think is a big reason why they have continued to be one of kind of the titans of K-pop. You know, there's a reason, no matter how much you dislike SM, I understand, but they've housed some amazing artists who, regardless of how long they stayed in SM, have had great careers, and like there has to be a reason for that. Like it's not just pure luck all the time that they just get the best talent. They of course have a lot of money, but even back then they housed the biggest groups when they had like a little bit less money, you know? So they definitely had the right formula for how to make an idol and, you know, what to teach them, which I think you have to kind of give them props for. They were also a group that had wanted in-house production, so they wanted all of their music to be produced within their own company, which is another thing. And like I said, they housed some of the big titans of Gen 1, including Shinwha, H.O.T, Fly to the Sky, BoA, S.E.S. Like some of the top Gen 1 groups were housed under SM, which is why they became such a titan at the early stages of K-pop. So next we'll talk about JYP Entertainment, and JYP Entertainment was started in 1997. But it didn't start as JYP Entertainment, it started as Taehong Planning Corp, and then in 2001 it was changed into JYP Entertainment. And JYP obviously stands for Jin Young Park, who is the man, the myth, the legend, the creator. He is also an artist. Here he is. I'm sure you've seen him around. He's still kind of active as like an idol. He's the only one of like the big three that like still is semi-active as an idol sometimes. Like he still releases music as himself sometimes. So where the other two, Lee Soo-man never did, and then Yan Hyun-sik for YG doesn't anymore, but JYP. And then in 1997, the same year that they were founded, they signed their first artist, which was a female artist. Her name was Pearl, and that was their first artist they ever signed in this company.
가지 말라고 떠나지 말라고 나를 이렇게 채워.
But a thing I think that really propelled them into like where the status that they are now is that in 1999, another company called S.E.S HQ had G.O.D, their company, but they introduced JYP as sort of G.O.D's mentor. And so they were, you know, got to work very close along together. So even though God was under like S.E.S HQ, they were very closely associated with JYP, and the whole first album was actually produced by JYP. So that connection definitely helped them because G.O.D was a huge group. And even though it technically happened after Gen 1, but in 2004 G.O.D moved from S.E.S HQ to JYP. So they were very closely connected that whole time, but didn't technically move until like Gen 2. But another big artist that JYP was able to sign was Rain. He signed Rain in 2000, and then Rain debuted in 2002, who again, huge artist now, was, you know, was part of that very close to the end of Gen 1, but Rain still I would consider as a Gen 1 artist. And then, last but not least, for the companies, we will talk about YG Entertainment. And YG Entertainment was founded in 1998, so the last of the big three, by Yan Hyun-sik, who I mentioned before. And you'll notice, if you look at his face, and if you were paying attention to when I was talking about Seo Taeji and the boys, you might notice a similarity. Because he was one of the boys, which I don't know why that just like tickles me, it makes me laugh so hard, but he was one of the boys, so he was part of that initial K-pop like boom you know, he was part of that group that made K-pop a thing in Korea. So that's very interesting. But he started his own company and definitely much more focused on like the hip-hop-y side, which I think you can still see today. It's still there by the groups that they have. It's a lot more kind of like less like clean-cut pop hee image like SM. They're much more like kind of like hip-hop-y, I guess, if that makes sense. But that's where it started. And so kind of a couple of the groups that kind of brought YG into like popularity and like made their name kind of were, I'm gonna pronounce this name wrong, I'm sure, but Jinushan, which was a duo, and then One Time was another kind of hip-hop-y duo. And they're kind of, along with those two groups, YG was kind of credited to bringing hip-hop into like the Korean mainstream K-pop-y thing, which is interesting, I think. And YG had other artists like Gummy and Wisung were also signed under them, and very interestingly, for their second YG Family album, released in 2001, GD was actually featured in that album, except at that point he wasn't GD, he was just a trainee and he was 13, which I think is very interesting because you'll find out when I talk about Gen 2 in a different video, GD was like very important. So it's interesting that like, even in Gen 1, GD was still there, still around, and that's where the seeds were planted for him. And so now that we know about the companies, I want to do a little bit more of like a deep dive into a few of the groups that I found the most influential. Like I said, I can't talk about every single group in a whole bunch of detail in this video because I don't want this video to be 25,000 hours long, but I thought I'd talk about like a few that I felt were really like influential, at least, to give you at least a little taste. And so the first group that I'm just going to talk about briefly is Shinwha. Shinwha, interestingly enough, is the longest running boy group, the active boy group with no member changes, which I think is just so fascinating because it shows that like it can happen. It doesn't happen often, but like they've done it and it can, and they're not like, of course, as the years have gone on, they're not like super duper crazy active all the time active, but they're still around. They never disbanded. They're here. They were the first group also that released an album post-military enlistment, because before that, obviously K-pop isn't that old, so there wasn't really much before that, but they were the first group to ever like go through military enlistment and then come back, which now I feel like is such a staple because lots of groups are doing that now, but Shinwha was the first. And like I mentioned earlier, they debuted with SM Entertainment on March 24th of 1998. And then they left SM actually in 2002, which I thought was very interesting. They were not with SM for very long. Then they were with another company called Good Entertainment until 2008. And then they debuted, they made their own company, and that manages their own stuff in 2011. And then they've been with, of course, their own company since then. Another group I wanted to kind of touch on very briefly was H.O.T. They debuted again under SM Entertainment on September 7th of 1996. And then they actually disbanded in 2001. So they were not around for very long, but super influential still. Like, they're still talked about. Part of that is because one of the members, Heejun, here's what it looks like. You might recognize him. He's been a host on lots of variety shows and kind of been around the variety thing. And then another member you'll probably recognize is Kangta, because he's actually still under SM Entertainment and releases music as a solo artist and like works with SM, like produces and makes music and stuff. So those two members are still around from this group and their music is still around. And then the last group that I'm just gonna talk about a little bit here, again, there's so many that I wanted to talk about, but I don't want this video to be 10,000 hours long, is S.E.S. They're also a group that was under SM Entertainment. I don't know why all the groups that I was like, I want to talk about these ones, they all ended up being under SM. But that's how it is, but I wanted to get at least one girl group in there, and S.E.S is a good one. So S.E.S stands for Si, Yujin, and Shu, which are the 3 members of S.E.S, except Si, her actual name is Bada, but that kind of sounds like C in Korean. I'm imagining that's where it came from, but it's just their 3 names in one group, but I think most people just call them S.E.S. And since they were also under SM Entertainment, a lot of people compared them, like kind of was like the female counterpart of H.O.T, was because they were just active at the same time and were both very popular. So they debuted in 1997 and then officially disbanded in 2002 in December because 2 of the members were unable to re-sign contracts. They just couldn't come to an agreement. The 3rd member, Shu, did stay with SM Entertainment until 2006, but the group officially disbanded at that time and then did come back together in 2016 and 2017, kind of as like a little revival. So they weren't gone forever, but they kind of, but they haven't really been active since 2002. Now their debut song was, the song that I know them for is I'm Your Girl. And this song was hugely popular, and it kind of promoted them into being one of the top selling K-pop idols of the time. And it's just so good. It's such a good song. I love it. And they definitely had like kind of the image of being sweet and innocent girls with a lot of like love songs, and their discography was definitely kind of their concept. And because of I'm Your Girl's popularity, they actually won the Rookie of the Year award at the Golden Disc Awards in 1998, which is super cool. They won tons of stuff. Like I'm just looking at their Wikipedia. They won a couple of bosangs at KBS Song Festival and KMTV Music Awards in like 1998 and 2001, which is super cool. They also won at the Golden Disc Awards as well. They won an album bosang for Love and the Popularity Award for Show Me Your Love in 1999 and 2001 respectively. They won, just tons of like Popular Singer Awards, Best Group, Best Female Group. And they won like Producer's Choice Award, Top Popular Artist for a couple years in a row. Like they were super popular, very, very kind of stable until their disbandment, which didn't seem to be from anything other than they just couldn't renegotiate a contract that they were all happy with. So it wasn't even like they hated each other or anything crazy happened. It just sometimes, they just couldn't renew the contract. And they did come back and, release another album in 2016 and 2017. So that's really exciting. And I just love them. They're some of my favorite like early female artists, along with like Boa. Those are my 2 like favorite female artists / groups from first gen. Now something I was really interested in looking at for this video was fandom, like what the fandom looked like in first gen. And it was very interesting because first gen was before lots of things. I mean, first gen was like before K-pop photo cards were a thing, which I think is crazy. So it was like, there was none of that kind of collecting mentality in terms of that. And this was also before light sticks, like themed group light sticks. So I was kind of like, I wonder how the fandoms kind of portrayed themselves. And I feel like they were more intense back then than they are now, because people, like fandom names and fandom colors existed in K-pop kind of from the beginning. So that was always a part of the K-pop ecosystem. But instead of having a light stick to show your support, you'd wear the color of your group, and there was balloons. There was either like just regular balloons that people would be waving in the crowd, or there was like the big slappy sticks, like people would just be going at it. And apparently fandoms were so intense that like if you wore like a piece of clothing that was like the of an opposing color, like say opposing artist, like say if you were wearing like white and the opposing an opposing group, their fandom color was blue, and you were wearing blue, then people would call you a traitor because you were wearing the other group's fandom color, which I think is just so interesting. I feel like the fandom color, that kind of thing, kind of doesn't exist as much anymore, like where people aren't gonna like call you a traitor if you're wearing a different color. It's more like the light stick color is now important. And of course, like the balloon thing doesn't really happen anymore because we have light sticks, so you don't need a balloon. Even though, oh my god, I'd love it. I'd love an official shiny balloon to just go crazy in a crowd. That'd be so fun. But unfortunately, with like that kind of side of fandom, which I think is quite, people might call you a traitor or whatever, but like having like the balloons and like that is all like kind of fun and games. But unfortunately, the bad side of the fandom existed back then as well. I feel like nowadays people, like if they don't like a certain artist, they will bad talk them on Twitter or on Instagram or on YouTube or whatever, or they'll leave nasty comments, or they'll probably, I'm sure they DM them. Like there's ways to, because there's access to like the person you dislike, which I think is crazy. Like why does anybody do that? But it is a thing that people do. But in first gen and kind of second gen, but first gen for sure, there was kind of no access to the members themselves because there wasn't social media. So members themselves didn't have like a way to access their fandom directly. It was all kind of done through promotions and stuff like that. So people couldn't just like tweet "I hate you" to a member. Instead, they would do things like writing them death threats and sending like messages written in blood to the people, or like physically assault them. One of the cases that I read about that happened in first gen is from the group Baby Vox. One of their members, her name was Eunhye. She almost went blind in one eye because an anti-fan, you know, they call them anti-fans. An anti-fan shot her in the eye with a water gun filled with soy sauce and vinegar, trying to blind her, which I think is bonkers. That is crazy. Like I'm so glad that she it seems to be, as far as I can tell, she's okay now, but like just because you didn't like an artist, like that's crazy, you know. But I think that was fandom was a little, because they had nowhere else to direct their energy, they would direct it like that. And instead of fighting people on Twitter, like fighting like I hate your group and I hate your group and having fan wars on Twitter, they would just fight each other in person and like actual physically assault each other and like punch each other and like rip hair out and like I can't remember if did I write it down? I was when I was researching, I found like a case of H.O.T fans and Sex Kiss fans were fighting, like physically fought each other because of like saying who was gonna win a certain award, and like were like actually ripping each other. And I think it was, I can't remember who it was that said it, but one of the members, I guess like during one of like the fan meetings, like a fan came up to him and she was like bleeding and she was like, you know, like, "Oppa, like I won against the other fan to like prove that you're the best. Like I fought them and I won." And at the time, I think his response was like, "I was kind of proud." But it's like that would never happen these days. Like fans would never physically assault each other like that and like get away with it. And like the groups would never, like, not that they condoned it, but they would never condone it at even a little bit at all now, which I think is just so interesting at how different the fandom is. I'm glad that nobody's punching each other anymore for K-pop, because that's a extreme. Another thing that I found kind of unfortunate, but I guess like understandable, is the dating thing was still a problem even all the way back in Gen 1. There's never been a time for these K-pop idols that they were able to just be in love at all. There was a case of a member of Click B, which was another K-pop group in Gen 1, where he, during a concert, professed his love for his girlfriend, who was in the crowd. She was like a minor actress, and he like, and at first I guess like when the fans like thought it was a joke, like he went on, he was like, "There's somebody that I love that's here tonight and I love her." And then, but then like they shone like the light beam on her, and like he like professed his love to her, and she was very touched by this. She was like, "Oh, like such a romantic gesture," but the group had to disband because of the controversy, because people lost their minds. Like people who were like fans in the crowd were like crying. They were so upset for no reason. Like I just don't understand why. Who cares? Like let them be in love. It's not like they can't do their job because they're in love. I don't understand why it's a problem. Especially because for this case, they were also dating beforehand. So it's like, we didn't know they were dating, and he didn't act any different. So it really doesn't matter. Why does it only matter when you find out? Like it was crazy. Like I felt bad for that group, and like, just like because he was just in love. And maybe he shouldn't have professed his love at a concert. I don't know, but they didn't have social media. So where else was he supposed to do it? Like I just don't understand why it was such a big deal, but it was, and it continues to be a big deal. Although that is something I really hope will change in future generations, where it won't be as big of a deal. Let's hope. And with that, that is kind of the end of the research that I did for this deep dive into Generation 1 of K-pop. Please let me know what you think about this sort of style. Again, if there's any specific group you want me to look into and do kind of something like this for, leave it down below, because I think this would just be so fun. I just love talking, and like I like to learn. I'm excited to like, you know, do a little more of a deep dive and just like learn more about different groups and different generations, different companies. It's exciting. I'm excited. So yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know if you did, or if there's anything that you think I should change or update, like leave it down below as well, because this is a format that I don't like, I'm just kind of testing out here. But yeah, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you in whatever my next video ends up being. Bye!